Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a truly powerful, almost unthinkable idea
Mm.
that the two world wars of the 20th century conflicts that, carried off scores of millions gave birth to ideologies like Leninism, Stalinism, Nazism, fascism could actually be considered unnecessary wars.
It's a really bold claim.
It is. Our source suggests these were two phases of what historians might one day call the Great Civil War of the West.
Yeah, it definitely challenges the standard narrative. So
Mhm.
this deep dive is all about unpacking insights from, well, quite a provocative analysis that really scrutinizes Britain's foreign policy decisions, both leading up to and during these huge catastrophes.
Right. And our mission really is to distill the most important nuggets, understand how things might have unfolded differently.
And what that means for how we look at conflict, maybe even strategy today.
So as we go through this, I want you, our listener, to think.
Okay.
What stands out to you as the biggest what if from this whole period?
Good question to keep in mind.
Okay, let's unpack this and start at the beginning. The road to what George F. Kennan famously called the original catastrophe, World War I.
Right.
For a long time, Britain had this policy, splendid isolation.
Exactly. Lord Salisbury, a key figure back then, he summed it up perfectly. Britannia rules the waves, stays out of Europe's quarrels.
He said, "We are fish," didn't he?
He did. The idea was keep Britain free, let other nations get tangled up while Britain enjoyed its global power.
But that couldn't last forever. What were the big shifts that forced Britain to change course?
Well, two massive things, really. First, the incredible rise of the United States. Suddenly they're the world's biggest economy.
Flexing their muscles.
Yeah. And second, maybe more volatile, was Kaiser Wilhelm II in Germany. Increasingly aggressive, wanting war.
Lord Salisbury's nephew, believe it or not.
That's right. So those two factors really put the pressure on. Splendid isolation was starting to look, less splendid and more risky.
And then the Boer War, 1899. That's often seen as the wake-up call. What did this source say about how deeply that shifted things for Britain?
Oh, it was huge. More than a wake-up call. Like you said, it was a shock. It showed just how alone Britain was.
Really? Europe cheering British defeats.
Absolutely. Even America.
Yeah.
Britain was stretched thin, huge empire, and suddenly realized it couldn't afford conflicts with other major powers. So that really drove the need to end the isolation, find some friends.
Okay, so enter Kaiser Wilhelm II, made some big blunders, according to our source, dismissing Bismarck, for instance.
Oh, a critical error, almost catastrophic, you could say. Bismarck had built this complex web of treaties, but keeping Russia friendly, France isolated.
Maintaining the balance.
Exactly. But the young Kaiser, kind of arrogant, maybe impetuous, he dismisses Bismarck and lets the treaty with Russia lapse, just like that.
And the result?
Russia immediately drifts into an alliance with France, the very thing Bismarck worked so hard to prevent, a massive own goal for Germany.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, the Kaiser goes after Britain's pride and joy, naval supremacy.
Yes. Pushed heavily by this fiercely anti-British admiral, Alfred von Tirpitz. He wanted a massive high-seas fleet.
And the source says this directly ended splendid isolation.
Explicitly. The building of the German fleet ended the century of splendid isolation. Tirpitz basically wanted a fleet so big that even Britain wouldn't risk a war with Germany. A direct challenge.
And there was that little incident in 1899, wasn't there? Searching German ships?
Right, during the Boer War. Seems minor, but the Royal Navy stopping and searching German passenger ships for contraband, it caused fury in Germany.
Even though they found nothing.
Found nothing. But the humiliation, the perceived insult, it fueled this massive anti-British feeling.
Yeah.
And very conveniently helped get the Kaiser's big Navy bill passed.
Yeah.
People thought, see, we need a strong Navy.
So tensions are ratcheting up, but the source also mentions this tiny cabal in Britain making secret commitments. What's that about?
Yes. We're talking about Foreign Secretary Edward Grey, Churchill, and Prime Minister Asquith. It seems that without full cabinet approval, or parliaments, mind you.
Really?
Yes. This small group started secret talks with French military officers way back in 1906.
1906.
And they weren't just chatting. They were making concrete plans, sending 100,000 British soldiers to France within 2 weeks if war broke out with Germany.
Despite the Liberals winning on a platform of peace, retrenchment, and reform.
Exactly. It suggests this sort of hidden commitment to intervention long before any formal treaty. Quite revealing.
Okay, fast forward to May 1914. Colonel House, President Wilson's advisor, visits Europe. His assessment.
Utterly chilling. He said Europe was Jingoism runs stark mad. Just
Yeah.
rabid nationalism everywhere.
He saw catastrophe coming.
Predicted an awful cataclysm. He felt Britain was backing France and Russia to crush Germany, while Germany saw Britain plotting against her. A real powder keg.
Yeah, just weeks before the assassination, there's this incredible scene at Kiel Week, June 1914.
It's almost surreal, isn't it? British and German sailors visiting each other's ships, parties, the Kaiser inspecting British dreadnoughts in a British admiral's uniform.
Tensions seem to be easing.
Visibly easing. A brief calm. And then June 28th, the telegram arrives. Archduke Franz Ferdinand assassinated in Sarajevo.
And the initial British reaction wasn't panic, was it? Lloyd George called it a small cloud.
Precisely. Even as late as July 23rd, he was talking about improved Anglo-German relations. Most thought it was just another Balkan mess.
But then things escalated. And First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, his reaction was different.
Yes. And this is, as you say, really fascinating. The source digs into his personal feelings.
What did it find?
Well, Churchill's biographer quotes a letter to his wife, Clementine, July 28th. Everything tends toward catastrophe and collapse. I am interested, geared up, and happy.
Happy.
Happy, he continues. Is it not horrible to be built like that? He seems to have been the only minister genuinely exhilarated by the prospect of war.
That's quite something. Speaks volumes.
It does. About his psychology, maybe his desire for a grand stage.
So, despite initial reluctance in the cabinet, how did Britain get pulled in? Churchill's buzzing, but others aren't.
The key was the Schlieffen Plan. Germany's plan to defeat France quickly involved marching through neutral Belgium.
And Belgium was Britain's red line.
Absolutely. That 1839 treaty guaranteeing Belgian neutrality wasn't just paper. It was fundamental British policy for centuries. Control of those channel ports was vital. Grey and Churchill knew this was the trigger.
So the German invasion of Belgium gave them the justification they needed.
Exactly. Public opinion would demand war. And Lloyd George, despite being anti-war before, he saw which way the wind was blowing.
Didn't want to risk his career.
Didn't want to repeat opposing the Boer War and being isolated. He saw his path to power. So when German troops crossed into Belgium on August 4th, he was on board. The war party had won.
And the source argues Britain's decision to send troops to fight on the continent was decisive.
Absolutely decisive. Sending an army to fight in Western Europe for the first time in a century, it argues, led directly to the horrors of trench warfare.
And America's entry.
Yes, eventually. Germany's collapse, the Kaiser gone, and crucially, the source links it straight to the dismemberment of Germany at Versailles.
Which then created the conditions for
Hitler. A veteran of that war, utterly unreconciled, demanding vengeance just a few years later, the seeds were sown right there.
So the Great War ends. But Versailles, our source calls it a poisonous spirit of revenge. Not really peace, but the start of the next problem.
Tragically, yes. Right after the armistice, Lloyd George actually called for a magnanimous peace. He warned against revenge, against greed. He saw the danger.
But that didn't hold. Politics intervened.
Not at all. The khaki election of 1918 whipped up public demand for a really harsh peace. Hang the Kaiser. Make Germany pay.
And France, led by Clemenceau, was determined to cripple Germany.
Oh, absolutely. Clemenceau, the tiger, France had lost 1.3 million men. He famously said, there are 20 million Germans too many. He wanted Germany broken permanently.
And the treaty reflected that. What were the key punitive measures?
It was brutal. Germany lost 1/10 of its people, 1/8 of its land, its entire overseas empire gone, merchant fleet confiscated,
Militarily.
severely restricted. Tiny army, no tanks, no air force, no submarines, no heavy guns. And then there was the war guilt lie, forcing Germany to accept sole blame.
A huge point of resentment.
Massive. And Churchill's role in enforcing the post-armistice blockade is highlighted too.
The starvation blockade, even after the fighting stopped.
Yes, he wanted to starve the whole population into
Right.
submission. It went on for months after the armistice. Truly grim.
What was the long-term effect of such a harsh treaty?
Germans just never accepted it. They saw it as a national humiliation, a scrap of paper imposed by force. They were determined eventually to get retribution.
And Lloyd George himself foresaw this, that Fontainebleau memorandum.
He absolutely did. It's quite prophetic. He warned that if Germany felt unjustly treated, she would find ways to exact retribution. He even specifically predicted a new war in the east of Europe because of the Polish corridor.
Chillingly accurate.
Tragically so.
So what was the final bill for Britain from WOWI?
Devastating. Nearly 1 million dead from across the empire, a lost generation, huge loss of moral authority. And crucially, financial leadership passed decisively from London to New York. Britain was indebted to the U.S.
And the Americans, how did they feel afterwards?
Many felt totally played for fools, a real bitterness that they'd been tricked by British propaganda into fighting Europe's war. Those stories of German atrocities in Belgium, widely debunked later, fueling isolationism.
So after WWI, we enter the interwar years, a period our source labels as full of follies in diplomacy and disarmament, starting with the Washington Conference, 1921.
Yeah, that's quite something. The U.S. pushed hard for naval disarmament, and Britain actually agreed,
Despite its empire.
despite relying totally on sea power. Even Churchill, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer then, argued for cutting silly little cruisers, saying they were of no use anyway.
Short-sighted doesn't quite cover it.
Not really. And then there was severing the Anglo-Japanese alliance. Our source calls it breathtaking stupidity.
Why was that so bad?
Because that alliance, which Britain ended mainly due to American pressure, had kept Japan kind of aligned with international norms with the rule of law.
Oh, hey.
Alienating them like that removed a key incentive. Japan felt isolated, betrayed, and it pushed them further towards military dictatorship and aggression in Asia. Big consequences.
This brings up Churchill again. As First Lord, he built up the Navy. As Chancellor, he cuts it. What's the thinking there? Opportunism?
The source suggests maybe both. Political opportunism, certainly he'd just rejoined the Conservatives, wanted to look fiscally tough.
Right.
But also maybe his deep belief that Britain just had to follow America, the American eagle. Of course, later he blamed the U.S. for Britain's naval weakness when Singapore fell. Convenient.
Then the Stresa Front collapses in 1935. Mussolini initially disliked Hitler, even proposed a pact to revise Versailles peacefully.
Yes, a real missed opportunity, perhaps. Mussolini suggested a four-power pact, Britain, France, Italy, Germany, to fix Versailles' problems peacefully, trying to avoid another war.
And Churchill's reaction?
Paradoxically, he attacked the idea vigorously in Parliament. Hard to square sometimes.
And then Britain does its own deal with Hitler, the Anglo-German Naval Agreement.
Exactly, in secret. Allowed Hitler a bigger navy than Versailles permitted. It completely torpedoed the Stresa Front, collective security, everything.
Gave Hitler a green light.
Pretty much. Showed Britain was willing to break ranks for its own perceived advantage. Churchill himself, ironically, called it a rotten bargain later.
And Britain's stance on Italy invading Ethiopia, pushing Mussolini towards Hitler.
Seen as deeply hypocritical, given Britain's own empire-building history, leading the League of Nations sanctions, diplomatically attacking Mussolini, it just alienated him completely.
So he turned to Hitler.
Felt he had no choice. Pushed right into Hitler's arms, the very man he'd initially despised. A disastrous own goal for Britain and France.
And the source points out Churchill's surprising, long-standing admiration for Mussolini.
It's really striking. From 1927 right up to 1940, even after the Pact of Steel with Hitler, Churchill publicly praised Mussolini, called him charmed, a great man, lauded fascism as an antidote to the Russian poison.
Wow. That really complicates the picture.
It absolutely does. Shows a pragmatism, maybe, or a focus on the communist threat above all else at that time.
Okay, so the stage is set. Hitler starts making moves. The Rhineland, 1936. Our source calls it a critical turning point.
Definitely. And what's key is France had already pulled out in 1930, 5 years early, because Britain insisted.
A strategic catastrophe, the source says.
Yes, because it removed the physical barrier, left the door wide open for German remilitarization.
So how did Hitler justify marching back in, playing the victim again?
Pretty much his standard playbook. Identify a grievance in this case, France making a pact with Soviet Russia, claim it's a threat, and respond proportionally. So March 7th, 1936, German troops marched back into the Rhineland, violating Versailles, violating Locarno.
And the Allies, did they react?
Nope. America was firmly isolationist, neutrality acts, FDR speeches. In Britain, King George V apparently said, "I will not have another war." Just deep war weariness, fear for the empire.
And some in Britain actually sympathized with Hitler's move.
Amazingly, yes. Lloyd George said Hitler was just arming for defense, called him a great leader. Anthony Eden admitted he rather liked him. John Simon called him an Austrian Joan of Arc with a mustache.
Good grief.
So their feeling was often, well, he's just putting Germans back in German territory, fixing Versailles.
What about Churchill? Surely he objected strongly.
His reaction at the time was actually quite muted, according to the source. Later writings paint him as the lone voice crying warning, but at the time, less so. He even later wrote admiringly of Hitler's patriotic achievement in the Rhineland.
Really? Hoping Britain would find such a champion if defeated.
Incredible, isn't it? A real nuance often lost.
So what were the strategic results of letting the Rhineland go, especially for France?
A disaster for France. By relying on the Maginot Line, they'd effectively conceded the Rhineland anyway. It signaled to their Eastern European allies, Poland, Czechoslovakia, that France wouldn't fight offensively for them. They were on their own.
A watershed moment, then.
March 1936. The source calls it the collapse of the post-WWI peace structure.
Okay, 1938. The Anschluss, annexing Austria. Again, the source reminds us Austrians had voted for union back in 1921.
Right. That desire was there, even though the Allies forbade it at Versailles. And it highlights Hitler's tactical opportunism, again seizing chances rather than following some rigid master plan.
Then that Hitler-Halifax meeting in late 1937, another green light?
A very significant one. Halifax basically told Hitler that Britain wouldn't fight over Austria, Czechoslovakia, or Danzig as long as changes were made.
Well, in a gentlemanly fashion.
Gentlemanly. With Hitler. Exactly. Military historian Liddell Hart saw it as giving Hitler special encouragement, removed any doubt Britain would intervene there.
Then the meeting between Hitler and the Austrian Chancellor Schuschnigg sounds like pure intimidation.
Oh, absolutely. Hitler apparently flew into a rage, a volcanic tirade condemning Austria's whole history, bullied Schuschnigg completely.
And Schuschnigg tried a desperate gamble, a plebiscite.
He did. Announced a vote on Austrian independence. Hitler went ballistic, saw it as betrayal, ordered the invasion even though the plans were basically just theoretical then.
And Mussolini's reaction is key here, isn't it? Quite surprising.
Hugely important. Initially, Mussolini was furious, reeling against that damn German. Remember, he'd stopped Hitler's first attempt in '34.
Right.
But then he sends a congratulatory message. Hitler was apparently ecstatic, emotional. I shall never forget this. I will stick with them, rain or shine.
And the source says this loyalty to Mussolini was a major cause of Hitler's downfall.
A principal cause, yes. Fascinating how personal relationships shape history. That loyalty would cost Hitler dearly later on.
So why did the Allies let Austria go?
They were trapped, militarily hamstrung and morally paralyzed, as the source puts it. How could they fight a war to stop Austrians joining Germany when 99% voted for it in the plebiscite Hitler held?
Would mean enforcing Versailles against self-determination.
Exactly. They'd preached self-determination. Now it was being used against them. They were cornered.
Okay, later in 1938, Munich.
Yeah.
The infamous agreement. What was the immediate reaction?
Overwhelming relief. Cheering crowds. Chamberlain hailed as a hero. FDR even tried to claim some credit. The press went wild. No conqueror ever came home with nobler laurels.
But not everyone was celebrating. There was dissent.
Oh, yes. Sharp dissent. Duff Cooper resigned from the Admiralty in protest, and Churchill gave that famous speech. We have sustained a total and unmitigated defeat. Predicted it was the end of the British Empire. Stark words.
And there was even a plot within Germany to arrest Hitler, put on hold by Munich.
Incredible story. High-ranking generals, fearing war, had a plan ready. But when Chamberlain flew over, the plotters lost their nerve, and Munich killed it completely. A huge what-if.
What was the actual issue in the Sudetenland? Why was it such a crisis point?
Another Versailles legacy. 3.25 million Germans put inside Czechoslovakia in 1919. Flagrant disregard for self-determination, the source calls it, may be the worst offense of the treaty.
So by 1938, they wanted to join Germany.
Naturally. And the source suggests Czech actions in May 38 actually provoked Hitler, humiliated him, pushed him towards force.
The word appeasement gets thrown around a lot. How does the source frame it? Not just cowardice.
No, it gives a more nuanced view. Originally, appeasement meant idealism, trying to find just solutions, fix Versailles' wrongs through negotiation. The fatal flaw was applying it to someone like Hitler, who just saw it as weakness to exploit.
And Hitler's own reaction, that scene when he got Chamberlain's note, shows his volatility.
Shocking moment. The interpreter said he'd never seen Hitler so out of control, screaming abuse, calling Chamberlain vile names, furious that Germans were being treated like second-class citizens. Pure rage.
But despite that rage, he agreed to Munich. Why? What changed his mind?
A crucial moment in Berlin, September 27th. He watched a military parade, troops rolling past his window for hours. And the crowds. Silent.
No enthusiasm for war.
None. Not a single individual applauded. Hitler was stunned. Realized the public wasn't eager for war. Apparently muttered, I can't wage war with this nation yet. That public apathy seems to have forced his hand.
So Munich, peace in our time. But then Hitler takes the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 39. And Britain makes the fatal blunder, the Polish guarantee, What led to that sudden shift?
Well, Czechoslovakia collapsing shattered Munich, obviously, destroyed Chamberlain's credibility. That was the backdrop.
But the catalyst for guaranteeing Poland specifically.
It seems to have been based on, well, bad intelligence. Wild, unverified warnings from the Romanian minister in London, Tilia, about an imminent German invasion of Romania.
Which wasn't true.
Bucharest denied it. The British military attaché confirmed it was false. But the British government panicked and believed Tilia. That panic led directly to considering a pact with Poland. Hasty decision-making.
But Hitler's demands on Poland were moderate compared to other things.
Surprisingly so, according to the source. Just wanted Danzig back, a 95% German city, and a road rail link across the corridor. He actually wanted Poland as an ally against Russia.
And the Poles refused.
Their foreign minister, Beck, kept refusing, felt secure with the new British backing, perhaps.
Was there opposition in Britain to this guarantee?
Strong opposition. Lloyd George called it a frightful gamble, said the people who approved it should be confined to a lunatic asylum.
Why so strong?
Because Britain had absolutely no way to actually defend Poland militarily on land. The guarantee was, in practical terms, empty.
And the source calls it the maddest single action this country has ever taken.
Even worse than Munich, it argues. An even greater British folly. Directly led to an unnecessary war, costing Britain hundreds of thousands of lives, bankruptcy, the end of the empire. A brutal assessment.
So if Britain and Poland didn't benefit, who did?
Stalin. Absolutely Stalin. The source says the guarantee was a massive gift to Moscow, gave him free what Stalin would have paid a czar's ransom for.
How so?
It guaranteed a war between Germany and the West. They'd bleed each other dry, leaving Stalin stronger, ready to expand communism. A brilliant strategic outcome for him.
So Chamberlain, under pressure, gets dragged into a war he didn't want, and Poland, the country with the guarantee.
Tragic outcome. They trusted the guarantee, fought fiercely, but were abandoned. France stayed behind the Maginot Line. Poland was crushed by Germany and the Soviets, suffered terribly, then endured decades of tyranny.
Compared to Prague.
Prague, betrayed at Munich, survived the war relatively intact. A really stark contrast.
Okay, so WWII happens, and the source offers this reframing. It wasn't really fascism versus freedom.
It argues, very provocatively, that it was fundamentally Nazism versus Bolshevism, an ideological death match. And in that fight, Hitler lost. Stalin won.
Leading to the Stalinization of 11 nations. Victory, but at what cost and for whom?
Exactly.
The analysis also takes a hard look at Churchill's legacy. Great war leader, yes, but a flawed statesman.
It acknowledges his immense role in 1940, Britain's finest hour, absolutely, inspiring leader. But it does question his strategic judgment.
Pointing to blunders.
WWI blunders like Antwerp, WWII blunders like Norway, and his persistent dismissal of crucial weapons like submarines and strategic air power. Great orator, maybe less great strategist.
And his moral compromises, the bombing of civilians.
Yes, the source is quite direct. His advocacy for terror bombing, ordering it on day one as PM, calls it the first deliberate breach of the fundamental rule of civilized warfare in centuries. Compares it to Genghis Khan.
That's strong stuff. He wanted devastating, exterminating attacks.
That was his stated aim regarding the Nazi homeland, yes.
And his racial views are also highlighted.
Very bluntly, I hate Indians. His desire to keep England white, even suggesting it as a slogan in the 1950s.
So the conclusion is?
Magnificent war leader, perhaps, but failed as a statesman. His goal was victory, full stop. Not necessarily a better, more stable peace. Even he apparently later reflected, I am not sure that I shall be held to have done very well. A surprising bit of self-doubt.
What about the special relationship with the U.S., a fantasy?
Largely a British fantasy, the source argues. America acted out of self-interest, looking to diminish British power.
Is there an example?
Before Lend-Lease aid even started, Britain was forced to sell off all its U.S. assets, hand over all its gold. FDR literally sent a ship to collect the last $50 million in gold. Doesn't sound very special, does it?
Not exactly altruistic. The source also challenges the idea Hitler wanted world mastery.
It argues he never really wanted war with Britain at all. He wanted an alliance with the British Empire.
What's the evidence for that?
Accepting a small navy. His constant focus eastward, on Russia. His offer to guarantee the French border if Britain stayed out.
He wanted to avoid that two-front war, the WWI mistake.
Exactly. He saw fighting Russia and the British Empire, possibly America too, as Germany's fatal error in WWI. He was determined not to repeat it. His strategic priority was always Lebensraum in the East.
And that message he sent just before invading Poland, August 1939.
A really chilling what if. He told the League's man in Danzig, essentially. Everything I do is against Russia. If the West is too stupid to see that, I'll have to deal with Russia first, smash the West, then turn on the Soviets.
He basically told them his plan,
Pretty much laid it out.
which leads to the source's argument. If Britain hadn't intervened over Poland.
The argument is stark. Hitler likely marches east against Stalin, maybe crushes Bolshevism. And crucially, tens of millions of lives in Western Europe might have been spared. The war could have been very different, possibly contained to the east.
It suggests communism was the greater long-term threat.
While both are evil, yes. Communism's broader appeal, its ability to hide under the guise of democracy, unlike Nazism's explicit racism, made it more insidious long-term in this view.
So finally, lessons for America today. Comparing the U.S. after WWII to Britain after WWI.
It's a powerful contrast. The U.S., guided by people like George Kennan, chose containment, not direct war, against Stalin.
Like the Berlin airlift instead of war. NATO instead of loan guarantees.
Exactly. A different approach. Strategic patience.
Winning without fighting.
That's the idea. The U.S. won the Cold War by avoiding the blunders Britain made, embodying Sun Tzu's principle. The greatest victory is winning without battle.
And the warning for today's superpowers.
The source asks if the U.S. now is repeating Britain's mistakes, imperial follies, overextension, guarantees for non-vital interests, risking foreign policy bankruptcy, and getting dragged into unnecessary wars. Question for you, the listener, to ponder.
Which brings us back full circle. Were World War I and World War II, for Britain at least, truly unnecessary wars?
Well, this deep dive, based on this specific analysis, strongly suggests that key British decisions at critical moments didn't just fail to prevent war, they actively made it more likely, or wider, or more devastating. The path taken wasn't the only path possible.
So the key takeaway seems to be that victory at all costs can come at a truly devastating cost. It can leave you weaker, bankrupt, your empire gone, makes you question the standard heroic narratives.
It absolutely does. Forces you to look at the choices made, the alternatives ignored, and wonder how differently the 20th century might have played out.
So for you listening, if knowledge is about application, what historical blunder discussed today holds the most urgent lesson for global powers right now? And what different perspective back then could have genuinely changed the course of the 20th century towards peace? Something to think about. What do you think?